Hello and welcome to another edition of the Talking City podcast. Myself, Alex James, joined by City writer Joe Bray, who still at the City campus. Joe, having spoken to Pep Guardiola this afternoon. Is that correct, Joe?
Yep, still feel like I never leave here sometimes, but it's a good place to be when Pep was in not very chatty form in the broadcast section of the embargo, but then poured his heart out in the embargo. So something to look forward to for Friday night if anyone's in and waiting by the phones to see what Pep's had to say.
Are you sitting in the manager's office, or are you more broom cupboard scenario there?
Probably more the broom cupboard. It's a decent media area here, but I'm sort of tucked away in the corner, so we can just have a chat.
We'll sort of kick off as we must, even if we don't particularly want to, with the latest of perhaps the collapses we thought we'd seen the back of after the sort of start to 2025 and the way results had turned around a little bit. But PSG on Wednesday night was a case of we been here before, and possibly as whatever number sequel this is now, this fifth or sixth time we've seen this happen in the last 2 or 3 months. Arguably the worst one to sort of contend with. Feyenoord, I guess, is up there just for the sheer ridiculousness of that one. But this PSG one, given everything that was on the line, given the way City had sort of worked themselves into that advantageous position, having not played particularly well, it's a really difficult one to stomach, and another head scratcher.
Yeah, I think I tweeted that saying it might have been the worst one of the lot, and then I had a lot of different offers of what could have been the worst one, which just sort of sums up, is it the United one where you throw away that in the derby at home? Is it always comes back to Feyenoord with 3 goals in 10 minutes, and Brentford was bad, Brighton was bad. I even think, Sporting Lisbon and Tottenham, the way that it just sort of went so quickly from 0 to 100 in terms of goals conceded. But yeah, it was a tight game. City weren't on top, but to get ahead and get those 2 goals, you just want that. You want to just control it. But within 5-10 minutes, it was back to 2-2, and from there, you never ever thought City were gonna do that again and get those goals. They'd done all the hard work and then threw it away. And I think, at Ipswich, they took players off at 3 and 4-0, and I think I tweeted they've passed the Feyenoord threshold, which is they're not going to throw it away here. And it's still, there's still something in the squad that means if you attack them, they're going to collapse and they're going to fall apart. But with all the sort of background of it, that the winner of that tie basically had 1 or 2 hands on a playoff place. The loser had to go to the final day and win. It was sort of a shootout, really, a final, and they lost that, and it was just another one. All the progress they've made, slow progress, sort of step by step in 2025, those sort of 7 games unbeaten, it felt like all of it just went out the window. It feels like we're back at, where we were on Christmas Day, where they can't buy a win and they hand in opposition chance after chance. And listen, PSG were very, very good. They were really good, but they exposed City's weaknesses. And, Mateus Nunes isn't a right back, and PSG knew that and made it very clear that that's where they're going to attack. And the midfield, again, not great. And it just, Guardiola keeps saying, if you attack us and have pace, you're going to do well against us. And it was pretty evident at PSG. I don't buy all this at PSG with the best PSG side we've seen for ages, and it's the start of a new era. But I think City did make them look quite good as well.
Yeah, I think you used the word control there early on, and it's control and it's collapse, and it's the same old, and the same explanations that we probably had 2 months ago are still there now. There's obviously the Rodri-sized hole, and Kovacic has performed pretty admirably, I think, although he didn't have his best game on Wednesday night. And then you go to the back 4, which changes every week, which has always got 1, 2, 3, 4 injuries, which without Ruben Dias just lacks that leader. And the run of fixtures coming up is just full of teams who can exploit City's weaknesses in a way that PSG did. You've got Chelsea, you've got Arsenal, you've got Newcastle, you've got Liverpool, you've got Tottenham. They're the next 5 league games. Something's got to change for City to avoid picking up very few points from those next 5 fixtures and leaving themselves an awful lot of work to do for the top 4 in the final, whatever it would be, 12 games of the season or so.
Yeah, without breaking any embargoes, that was basically the topic of what Pep was trying to sort of get across. I think he knows how important that run is. In a normal season, we're saying this is going to define your season. If you get through this, you'll win the title, because City are 5th going into this weekend, and they've got the other 5 teams in the top 6 in the next 5 games, plus Tottenham as well. And it's, like you say, it's a very difficult run. Add Club Brugge into that, where you've got to win, and if you don't win, your season just collapses. We said in a previous podcast, if they don't qualify in the Champions League, there's going to be a hell of a lot of heat from all angles on them, and they might have got away with a little bit. They've had a lot of scrutiny, but you can always excuse it with injuries, etc., and all of the mitigating factors. But if you don't qualify in the Champions League, then you're in real trouble, and you're just opening a sort of a tidal wave of criticism and questions. And even with these injuries, City should be making the top 24 teams in Europe by a country mile, and the fact that they're not, and it's gone down to the last day, is pretty damning. But yeah, the run is not great, and it will define how they do. Normally, you'd say it's a great opportunity to prove everyone wrong, and prove City right and Guardiola right, and that you're a fantastic team and all of that. But you don't see it. I think we're back to the mentality questions and the confidence questions, and Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, they're all just going to be licking their lips with knowing how easy City are to attack. And it's going to be very interesting to see how Guardiola tries to get the team back up for it, and also get them to a point where they've got barely any defenders to just be solid and give the attackers a chance to score goals.
Yeah. And that Champions League scenario, if you look at City's eight fixtures at the start, to not get 11 points from those 8 fixtures, I don't think you'd have found anybody saying they've won 2 of them convincingly. And aside from that, they've struggled massively. And lots of people will think Bruges, who were they? Like, we won't know too much about them, but they've beaten Villa. I think they beat Sporting as well. They drew with Juventus in the week. They're going to be no pushovers, and I think they're kind of almost through. I think it would take a ridiculous set of circumstances for them not to qualify, but I think they still need something. That's not going to be an easy game with, as you say, with the pressure that comes on what is a season-defining final, as Pep called it, I think, earlier on.
Yeah, and he's absolutely right to say that. We didn't think we'd get to this stage in the sort of new look Champions League, but we are right there, and City have to win this game. No excuses, no second chances. They've just got to do it. Simon, who is obviously not on the podcast today, and is taking a day off after going to Paris, he tweeted the other day, Opta simulated the group stage 50,000 times before it started, and the chance of City finishing with 8 points, which is what they've got now, was 0.4%, and 11 points if they beat Bruges, just 2%. And that is exactly what you were just saying. Nobody expected, not even an Opta scientific simulation of 50,000 times and however many results that would entail, think that City would do it. It's just unthinkable. And yes, again, injuries, blah blah blah, but City shouldn't be in this position, and they know it, and they've got to scrape through. And it doesn't really bear thinking about what could happen, I don't think, for City, because there's financial consequences, but also I think it will be a massive just dent in the confidence, and I'm not sure it would be very good going into that run of fixtures, as we say, with the top 4 place at stake in the Premier League.
I guess the one sort of saving grace is it's black and white, isn't it? The scenario is win or bust. There's no kind of reliance on what might happen in 6 other matches kicking off at the same time, and whether a goal here might change this, or 2 goals there, or whatever. It's as clear as it can be. Go out, perform well, win the game, you're through.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be 3-0 or 4-0 or
exactly,
any number of goals, and keep your goals conceded down to a level. It doesn't have to be any of that. Just win the game, and you go through, you overtake them, your goal difference will be better, and therefore you finish in the top 24. And I mean, we were chatting about who City could get if they got to the playoffs, and the various draw permutations, and there might be a lot of looking elsewhere at all the other results for that, but it will only be relevant if City are in a position where they're winning and they get into that top 24.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at it now, and it's not, Feyenoord and Monaco, I think, are among the teams who are towards the top of that in 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th kind of positions. There are going to be winnable ties in that. In a normal season, even if City had sort of slumped as they had, you would be looking at that playoff tie thinking, yeah, Feyenoord and Monaco and Lille, Celtic or PSV, whoever it might be, over 2 legs. Straightforward enough. So it isn't all doom and gloom, and I accept they might play Real Madrid and they could get Bayern Munich and what have you, but the chances are they'll get a very winnable tie in that last 16 if they beat Bruges and pick up a couple of results in these key games, as we've seen a million times before with City second half of the season. Bit of momentum, confidence comes back, a couple of injured players come back, settled defence, 3 new signings, off we go. I've just talked myself into City finishing second and winning the Champions League, AJ, I think.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because all those teams you mentioned, you would back City in any other season to win, but then you got Dortmund, Bayern, Real Madrid, Juventus, just in that middle bit, and could be Aston Villa, Leverkusen if they're overtaken, maybe even AC Milan. All those, like there are a lot of tough teams as well. And you would also say in any other season, City will beat Bruges at home. I think they put 5 or 6 past them last time they played them in the last season or 2. You don't back City to beat anyone at the moment, and it feels like we've gone from our City back, are they going to do really well, to City are doomed in the space of 90 minutes at Paris, which sort of is the case. But that mentality is still there. I think all an opposition team has to do is get a goal and attack, and you've got a good chance, which never used to be the case. So, I think it's up to City. It's going to be, like Pep says, a season-defining game, but just how they approach it, and if they do it, it'll be confidence boosting. And they could get a team like, just for example, Celtic. They should be beating Celtic. They were close in pre-season when City had no players and were playing a load of under-18s, and Celtic had a full-strength team. If they had that sort of game, they could just use it to build that confidence back up, especially in the middle of all the Premier League ones. But no, it feels like the way that they collapsed at PSG has just taken us back to Christmas, with the mentality and the doom and gloom, and the sort of everything Pep's saying is now it's back to being negative when it was positive. And he was trying to temper expectations from a position of strength and build the way out of it, and it's just come crashing back down. It's a shame the way it happened. If they just lost 1-0 and given a good account of themselves, I don't think it would have been the same thing.
Well, let's try and find some positivity in the shape of 100+ million and 3 new signings. I'm going to take your pronunciation advice on the new centre half who's joined. I'd rather you go first with that than me, but they all look obviously good players. Omar Marmoush is probably the one who you look at as first team ready, given his exploits in the Bundesliga this season. But the 3 of them could conceivably be needed over the coming weeks, particularly the 2 centre halves, given the sort of news from the press conference this afternoon about Ruben Dias.
Yeah, so Dias is out, and Pep didn't really give a time frame on that. Nathan Ake still isn't ready. He seems to suggest that John Stones isn't ready to start. He obviously came back, and they are very wary with players like Dias and Stones not to aggravate anything further. They had to play Dias against Ipswich on his first game back. He played 90 minutes, then he plays 45 minutes at Paris, and then he's back out again. And suddenly a player that's been fit all the time is now continually getting injured and might be set for another spell on the sidelines. And there is a scenario where Abdulkadir Kusanov, I'm going to go with that. If I say it confidently enough, that's what it is. There's a scenario where Kusanov is needed. We were just saying in the sort of press room that it would be very helpful if he goes by like Abdu rather than Abdulkadir. But we'll see what happens with him. He could be needed. Guardiola was saying he needs to adapt, but he has the sort of attributes that could be useful. He's obviously very fast. That's a massive attribute of his. And maybe Vita Rice, which I know is not the way you say it, but I don't want to try and butcher the Brazilian pronunciation. Maybe he is a longer term one. I think he will be in the squad against Chelsea, but it seems like he's got a little bit more to do. And he's obviously 2 years younger and probably is in the same category as the 18-year-old defenders from the academy in terms of experience and sort of suitability and readiness for the Premier League. But no, it sounds like he has no choice but to play these. I wonder if Marmoush might get a start or at least a good showing off the bench just to shake things up and add a little bit of unpredictability and maybe even give someone like De Bruyne or Foden or someone else a rest ahead of that Bruges game, because Marmoush can't play in that, but he can play against Chelsea and is obviously in very good form and knows how to score goals and assists. So it could be sort of a secret weapon, if you like.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if, well, although you're never quite surprised with how City use their substitutes, are you? But be surprised if Marmoush, if he doesn't start, doesn't get 20 plus minutes off the bench. I think it would be a huge call to put Kusanov straight in. I know he's a £35 million centre half, and you'd expect signing a £35 million centre half to be able to go straight into a team. But I think he's 20, isn't he? And he's played about 25 games in the French for Lens, and maybe a few in was it Belarus he was in before then? So that's not a lot of games to play, and then to go straight into a Premier League game against Chelsea, where you've had 2-3 sessions perhaps, where you have a language barrier and where you're going into a defence that isn't exactly full of confidence. Well, that would be a huge gamble for me. I think I'd probably be more tempted to put Gvardiol across with Akanji, and if you have to use Mateus Nunes at right back again, and we'll come on to the right back situation in a second, and Rico Lewis at left back, which, having said that out loud, doesn't fill me with a clean sheet confidence, but I just think it'd be into the lion's den for Kusanov. It would be a brave and bold call for Kusanov to go straight into that team, I think. I don't know if you completely disagree with that, but
I can really see both sides, because if that back four that you've just suggested has 3 players out of position, and Manu Akanji is very good, but you need him to be the leader there, and he's often better when he's got someone else being the leader. That's just the way he plays. He's more a sort of partner rather than a marshaller, and that's sort of not really his role. I do think Cole Palmer, and whether it's Madueke or Sancho or whichever one of Chelsea's 500 wingers plays on the other side, they would have a field day against Nunes and Lewis, especially Lewis at left back. So that would be the logical one, but the only other option is to put Kusanov in, or do you bring John Stones back ahead of schedule and risk an injury, which, let's face it, he probably will pick up if he starts a game against Chelsea sort of quicker than his rehab suggests. And it's not ideal. And I don't really have I don't even know what I'd do, so God knows what Pep Guardiola will do.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be an ideal scenario, does there? Because you put Kusanov in and then you move Gvardiol onto left back and put Lewis at right back, and at least you've got 4 players playing in. Well, although you could argue Gvardiol's still out of position there, really, other than he's been a left back since he arrived at City, but he wasn't really a left back until he arrived at City. And then you've got the long-term right back situation with Kyle Walker imminently going, Lewis question marks around him. I don't know what the solution there is. For the City have to sign a right back. Can Lewis do the job till the summer? Is John Stones the best answer there when fully fit to play at right back?
Yeah, I do wonder if the plan is to get Stones and Akanji and enough defenders back so that Stones and Akanji can play at right back, but there's some suggestions that they could be earmarked for sort of helping out the defensive midfield role. Guardiola was asked about sort of the cover of right back. I was just looking whether it was in the open or embargo section. He was asked in the open section whether it was Kyle Walker's expected exit is does he need more cover at right back? And because it was a Kyle Walker question, he just replied, "It is what it is." And there was nothing. There was no talk of needing any transfers. There was no talk of getting involved in anything about Walker wanting to leave. I think there's something there that, I mean, Guardiola doesn't seem very happy with, but he's not going to let us know about that with any sort of black and white comments. So yeah, I like Rico Lewis, I really do, but he's just been played too much and he's not coping well with being a sort of senior player or having all this pressure on him with everything going wrong, and his performances have dropped as a result. I don't think the criticism of him is very fair. There's a few players who are getting criticism like that where they've actually had to play a lot, and the reason they're not performing is because they're just absolutely shattered and they played too much football. But also you look at Núñez, and again, I like Núñez. He's played in a lot of different positions. I think his best role is probably as a substitute midfielder, but he's definitely not a right back. And he's making mistakes at right back that are costing goals and costing points from winning positions. So yeah, it's another one. I don't really know what to do. I think if you have everyone fit, I think Akanji probably is your best stopgap there until you can buy someone else. But yeah, we're also saying Walker could play there, but Walker's been fit most of the season. He's not been playing well enough to start, so it's not really a new situation. But Walker not being there takes away the sort of slim chance of him coming back and suddenly rediscovering his form.
Yeah, I think you're right with Lewis as well. I think people forget that he's 20.
Just turned 20, yeah.
Just turned 20. He's probably played, I don't know, maybe 50 senior starts, something like that, which is a lot at that age, but isn't a lot in the grand scheme of things. And he's still someone learning his trade. He's playing in a defence this season that's very fragile. He's been playing a couple of different positions. Sometimes he's been asked to go into midfield and invert. And if the scenario is Lewis underperforming is the problem, then there are bigger problems. That shouldn't be underpinning a poor season or a poor defensive season. But yeah, I think you can make an argument. I mean, what is it now? The 24th of January, so you've got 10 days of a window left. You can make an argument that City have to sign a right back. You can make an argument that City have to sign a defensive midfielder. You could possibly make an argument City have to sign a goalkeeper sooner rather than later. They're not going to sign all these players, and right back is probably the most likely, if even unlikely, if that makes sense, the most likely of an unlikely extra transfer, would you say?
Yeah, you can see the value of Cambiasso from Juventus has been linked, and there's interest, and if he can play on both flanks and just relieve pressure a bit, and I think you can see the value of that. But I also think City are, even in this situation, will not go for a deal that doesn't make sense. So if they need to just stumble on to the end of the season, they've got enough options. But again, I'm not sure. I think I would prefer to put faith and time into Lewis than persevere with Núñez in that position, because Lewis is a right back and he's just out of form, but Núñez isn't at all. And I think his attributes would probably be better somewhere else. But then it's another question for another podcast of where does he fit and where is his best role.
Yeah, we're not short of questions, are we, for these podcasts? And obviously Walker's, I think, departure is imminent. So we've kind of covered that already, really. And I know you've spoken about him lots and lots of times on podcasts this season. But just kind of looking ahead to Chelsea, regardless of what sort of patched up team ends up taking the field for City, this is going to be a very interesting game. Guardiola, Maresca, Chelsea having sort of had a little wobble and then returned to winning ways last time out. Obviously, Cole Palmer, there's Jadon Sancho. There's narratives aplenty there in terms of former City personnel who could come back and cause problems. But the one thing we have seen from City in the last 6 weeks is the goals are returning. Jack Grealish has got 2 in the last month, having gone however long it was without one. Savinho sort of showed his capabilities a lot more consistently in the last 6 weeks. So in terms of attacking threat, we are seeing a little bit more of what we wanted to see from City, which is not a reliance on Haaland or nothing, and a little bit more sort of fluidity and a little bit more form from a De Bruyne, a Foden, a Savinho, etc.
Yeah, it does seem to be linking a bit more in attack, and when they go 2-0 up at PSG, you think, oh, great, they've scored all these goals in 5 or 6 games, 20 odd goals, and now they've got 2 at PSG. Quick fire, they've they've got that sort of mentality, that ruthlessness back, and then obviously it all collapses. But the stats are, and the Ipswich game was very good in that a lot of those attackers are all linking together and assisting for each other, as well as getting goals and assists for themselves. And it's tricky when they've beaten Chelsea in recent seasons. City have controlled the game, stopped Chelsea playing, kept it tight, kept the score down, and just been better than them in 1-0, 2-0, 2-1s, that sort of thing. Chelsea have got results by opening it up, going end to end, making it a basketball game, really. And that you sense that they will want to do exactly what PSG did and open it up and get on the transitions and be fast and attack City's flanks and attack the weaknesses and play through the middle with speed, and that's how they'll do it. But I'm wondering, with all the defensive issues, is that going to be City's best way to get a result with the attackers on song and the defenders not? If you go fully defensive, you're going to be really, really putting pressure on 3 or 4 players out of position and under fire, and you're probably not going to get a result. So it'll be interesting to see if Guardiola just goes, you know what, let's just try and score more than you. And we've got Haaland, we've got Marmoush to come off the bench, and De Bruyne and Foden and Savinho, and suddenly Jack Grealish has a little bit back in his step. And I don't think he'll do that. I think he will think it's too much risk, but I also think that might be the only way of getting something. And if it's a case of trying to score a lot and coming undone and conceding a few, it might have to happen. But that doesn't, as much as I'm saying these words out of my mouth, that isn't a Guardiola approach at all. So I can't see it, and I'm not sure how successful a sort of a containing and control strategy would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's not difficult to see how opposition teams are going to line up and play against City at the moment. The formula has been so proven by so many different teams, by at home and in Europe, that it isn't difficult to see that where City are going to be put under pressure. And as you say, Guardiola, like a lot of managers, are stubborn and will try and play their way regardless. But there has to be a little bit more. I mean, the PSG second half the first half was too open, I would argue. Mm-hmm. The second half was absolutely crackers in terms of the...
well, that's why he brought Grealish on, wasn't it? To try and control things, and it worked, and then suddenly it didn't.
And we come back to control again, but that's job number one, has got to be able to just control the game for half an hour and go from there. And I know that sounds like not the way a 4-time defending Premier League champion should be approaching a game, but I just think that's a reality of where City are at the moment, that they almost can't afford to go 2-0 up or 2-0 down, if that makes sense. They need to sort of regain control and just play as we are so used to seeing City play, because we've seen what happens when they go 2-0 up and it doesn't end well.
That just sums up the last 3 or 4 months perfectly, and there's no logical explanation to why it does. But yeah, they're not title contenders, so they can't really approach it as title contenders. They've got to do what they can to beat Chelsea and leapfrog them into the top 4, and that could be if they got top 4 or top 5, which could still get Champions League football, that'll be a huge success this season. And Chelsea are one of the main competitors for that, so they've got to do what they can to get the 3 points. I think it's similar to the Bruges game. It's just black and white. Just beat them. Don't necessarily worry about anything else, because I think they're getting in their heads too much with various things. Just go out and try and beat them, and it will turn the PSG result into a better situation if they can get a result and then it's suddenly 1 defeat in 9 rather than 2 on the spin and crisis mode again. So I think it's going to be really important how they approach it and how the result pans out going into that Bruges game. And as we've said, that's going to be important for the whole season. So it's a very, very big week, and a lot of questions of how they're going to approach it. I genuinely don't know what is going to happen at the Etihad tomorrow, so it'll be interesting. But no, there's some very interesting and telling comments from Guardiola to come out in the evening tonight about sort of things what you said, like how opposition teams are setting up and where he sees City's ambitions and aims and progress this season. So I think with that in mind, it will be interesting to put all that into context with the game and the lineup and the approach as well.
Yeah, and even if they had beaten PSG, other than it would have stopped us talking negatively for 15 minutes, PSG is still going to finish probably in the bottom 8 of that playoff section. Like, it doesn't change too much in terms of the Champions League if City get the job done on Wednesday. So there's that side of it anyway. And as you say, if they can beat Chelsea and Bruges, everything flips. You've then got a bit of confidence, or a little bit of confidence, or a little bit of momentum going into those tough league games. You've got an FA Cup game where surely they go through, and you're into the last 16, and you're 1 or 2 favourable draws away from potentially being in an FA Cup final again, and that's probably the main avenue of silverware. I guess that would be a successful season, lift the FA Cup, make sure they're in the top 4, and at least compete into the latter stages of the Champions League.
I think if you offered that scenario to Guardiola now, he would snap your hand off and just try and get to next season and to the Club World Cup in a position where you can challenge and just write the season off. And if you can get a trophy along the way, great. But I think, top 4 or 5 is going to be the priority. Don't make the crisis worse in that you can't ever get out of it. So I think the FA Cup's going to be important. Just getting to this playoff round. If they're losing the playoff round, they're losing the playoff round. But just getting past that knockout stage, I think, is absolutely vital. And top 4 Champions League football. I think they've just got to look close to home in sort of that. And like I say, this week is going to be very telling in both of those aims. Yeah.
Well, we set it up nicely there for what is going to be a really, really interesting game on Saturday, a huge game on Wednesday, and then a huge month in February, which hopefully from a City perspective will include at least, I don't know, I think both playoff games will be, aren't they? So that's a huge few weeks ahead. We'll have every sort of step of it covered as per usual on the MEN. Joe will be at the Etihad tomorrow along with Simon, if we can rustle him back from a day off. So keep abreast of everything, and as Joe said there'll be plenty of content Friday evening, some really interesting stuff from Guardiola, well worth checking out across all our usual channels. So thanks very much, Joe, for joining us from City, and we'll see you all soon.